Iran has ascended from observer state to full member of the UN Scientific Committee on Effects of Atomic Radiation, UNSCEAR. That committee, which was set up in 1955, is tasked with providing information on occupational, medical, natural radiation and the associated health risks. The importance of the work is testament enough to Iran's nuclear capability for civilian use. It's a capability Iran acquired in spite of sabotage and sanction at almost every critical turning point. This country is among the top 8 in that it can produce a full nuclear fuel cycle without foreign help. The usual suspects, America and Israel, aren't pleased, but Iran has weathered it all. And now it has indigenous facilities and abilities, nuclear facilities and abilities, which I will bring to you in this episode. So stay with me, Leila Faramarzi, on Iran Today. Iran can complete the nuclear fuel cycle from the stage of exploration, extraction, conversion, enrichment, fuel production to waste management, as well as mastering various types of lasers and quantum technology. We got to talk to Dean of the Nuclear Faculty at Shahid Beheshti University. That would be Mr. Aghamiri, PhD.
Taking a closer look at the world, you'll realize that countries aren't usually involved in all the aspects of nuclear technology. France, for example, is solely focused on enrichment, Namibia on mining, another nation on fuel production, and so on. That is, the work is shared amongst them. There have been only 3 countries that have done the whole process by themselves, namely the United States, China and Russia in the days of the former Soviet Union. Now that Iran wants to start work on peaceful nuclear energy and have reactors, it should have access or free access to any of those matters. That's why it attempted to complete the fuel cycle by itself.
Never mind this country's nuclear program in general. Even Iran's full membership to UNSCEAR faced stiff opposition from Israel and the US. That doesn't fit with their show of suspicion towards Iran's nuclear program, though, because full membership will mean this country's participation in peaceful nuclear activity and services on the international scene, rather than on just the national scale. Iran will be an extra pair of hands among 4 recent additions, bringing the UNSCEAR list up to 31 full member states. Mr. Beheshtipour is a nuclear affairs specialist who served as correspondence bureau chief here at Press TV. He joined us on Skype.
Iran has always wanted to become a member of the committee and has had the qualifications too. Also, it may be exposed to radiation because of Israel's adventures. We are not exposed at the moment, but there is always the potential danger. Therefore, Iran's cooperation on the matter can both help develop Iran's scientific knowledge and also result in international cooperation to prevent nuclear radiation anywhere in the world. The US and Israel have had no valid argument for their opposition to Iran's membership in the committee. This, unfortunately, has been in line with their opposition to the advancement of science.
Iran's permanent ambassador to the United Nations, Takht Ravanchi, made a comment on the significance of the committee and valuable contribution Iran would make to it. This country would help expand knowledge and understanding of levels, effects, and risks of exposure to ionizing radiation. It could help in the training of personnel and protecting public and environmental health against harmful effects of atomic radiation. Iran has been invited to introduce a nuclear scientist to participate in the UNSCEAR meetings.
There are 3 natural radiation zones in Iran where uranium is located near the surface of the ground and radon gas has the highest concentration compared to anywhere else in the world. In some areas where there are hot springs, there's a high concentration of radon gas too. We announced in 1990 that we have the necessary standards for radon gas. The work kicked off and the IAEA held a conference conference in the northern city of Ramsar. We expected them to start their work sooner because of Iran's capabilities, so we could become a member of the standard-setting board that determines the scales, units and other technical nuclear matters. Fortunately, this has been done now, which is a positive development.
Nowadays, and with the rapid increase in use of nuclear technology for peaceful purposes in many areas, including power production, health, agriculture, biotechnology, pharmacology and industry, the committee's role is becoming increasingly imperative, Takht Ravanchi said. Some say, what good is a nuclear program to Iran when it has only meant sanctions and further economic hardship? I'm pretty sure our nuclear scientist has a confident answer to that, though.
Some people would ask, why go after nuclear energy when we already have oil and gas? But if the argument was true, the Shah also had oil and gas, but why did the West provide him with nuclear energy? Rest assured that nuclear energy, if done right, is one of the cleanest and most economical energies. The United Arab Emirates is one of the world's biggest producers of oil and gas, but it already has built a reactor and has signed a contract with South Korea for 3 more. So has Saudi Arabia.
Iran unveiled 133 new nuclear achievements to mark its 15th anniversary of the National Nuclear Technology Day, 9th April. It injected uranium hexafluoride gas into a pilot cascade of 164 new generation IR-6 centrifuges at the Natanz enrichment facility. Mechanical testing of IR-9 centrifuges also began as this country launched an assembly line for their production. IR-6 centrifuges are known to be 10 times more efficient than the previous cascade, while the IR-9 centrifuge is 50 to 60 times more efficient.
Uranium enrichment requires the most complicated technologies to both prevent vibrations and increase the centrifuge's speed and power. Imagine something spinning at 60,000 rotations per minute. That's 1,000 rotations per second. The slightest vibration can result in an explosion and damage. The technology must work very accurately to be able to be used. Iran can ramp up its enrichment purity fast if and when it wills.
Whatever the purpose of Iran's program, Israel is not in a place to point fingers. If only folks knew their place. Israel, otherwise known as the Zionist regime, has not adhered to the rules and regulations prohibiting the production, development and stockpiling of weapons of mass destruction and its arsenals. Also, Israel displays a threatening temperament towards world peace and security and regional stability, whereas Iran's nuclear projects and products speak for themselves. So please listen closely to hear of this country's nuclear program's humanitarian uses. Some other projects and products displayed at the Iranian exhibition, by the way, are as follows. 1. The second phase of industrial plants producing deuterated compounds in Khandab in Iraq. Those are for emergency care for burns using radiation therapy. And 2, a number of centrifuge machines used by the Blood Transfusion Organization of Iran. And 3, 110 isotope-based biomolecules used in neonatal screening kits. Also unveiled was a device for online metering of uranium hexafluoride purity and 4 new radiopharmaceuticals.
Iran's success in the field of making medicine and isotopes to treat cancer patients in the past few years has been remarkable. Iran has produced several radiopharmaceuticals. Iran has also continued its studies on making uranium metal. Iran wants to make uranium metal to improve the fuel at the Tehran reactor. The West's propaganda claims Iran is doing so to make a bomb, but uranium metal has different uses.
Time for a short break. We'll be back in no time. To sum it up, nuclear science doesn't have to mean an atom bomb of the kind America dumped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in the 1940s, nor does it have to line up nuclear warheads of the kind Israel is known to have hundreds of. It has scientific humanitarian use Iran's upgraded UNSCEAR membership would enhance. Medically, it can be used for diagnosis by PET devices and for treatment by radiotherapy, radioisotope therapy, that's unstable and radioactive isotopes of an element, or even iodine therapy, a method for treating hyperthyroidism. Iranians are even making important laboratory tools such as cyclotron and radiomix.
Iran built a factory in 2003 to make heavy water for the Arak reactor. The factory is still active and produces heavy water under the supervision of the IAEA. One of the uses for heavy water is in nuclear reactors that work with natural uranium and don't need any enrichment. The Arak reactor, with a 40 megawatt capacity, will be making medicinal radioisotopes. It's currently still under construction. Tehran is still doing work to complete the project by itself.
Not easy to respectably criticize the scientific outcome of research and nuclear activity. But the path in getting there is spiked and freely criticized. The West criticizes Iran's production of uranium metal. But Ali Akbar Salehi, former AEOI head, said the Tehran research reactor uses old fuel, and we must look for a new fuel that is at the forefront of knowledge. We produced a sample of uranium silica alloy. Unfortunately, it was high purity, and we will use this fuel for the Tehran reactor in the future. Interestingly, Iran can design modern fuel itself instead of reverse engineering it. But where does it all happen? I have a list of some of Iran's nuclear facilities, some famous, others hardly heard of, which I will bring to you, but after a quick media review. And here's what our select media outlets have to say. Mehr News reads, global arrogance not tolerate Iran's scientific technological progress. Head of the Atomic Energy Organization of Iran, AEOI, said the enemies of the Islamic Republic do not want to see the scientific and technological achievements of the country in the international arena. He made the remarks on his visit to the exhibition of Iran's nuclear industry achievements, which was held at the Den of Espionage, that's the former US embassy in Tehran, on Wednesday, November the 10th. During the visit, Eslami emphasized that development of advanced technologies, especially nuclear science and technology, is a need for the development and progress of the country, and noted that enemies of the country are leaving no stone unturned in order to stop Iran's scientific and technological progresses, so that Iran is equipped with talented scientists and researchers who are able to steer the country towards development and progress in international arenas. It should be noted that some of the most important achievements in Iran's nuclear industry were showcased in the exhibition in the fields of radiation application, nuclear agriculture, industrial and medical centrifuges, diagnostic and therapeutic, radiopharmaceuticals, medical laser prostate surgery, nuclear fuel cycle, heavy water production, and the likes. Tehran Times quotes an MP who says new round of talks should ensure national interests. The deputy chairman of the Parliament's National Security and Foreign Policy Committee has stressed that the Vienna talks, which will start in late November with the purpose of lifting sanctions on Iran, should ensure the country's interests. If the negotiations serve our interests, we will pursue them seriously, and if the interests of the Iranian people are not served, there is no reason to pursue attritional negotiations, Abbas Moqtadai said. The MP added, the simplicity of the negotiations is due to the fact that the Islamic Republic fully fulfilled its obligations based on the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action JCPOA, but the Western parties, especially Americans, did not fulfill their obligations which they had accepted, and they harmed Iran's interests by not adhering to their commitments. Tasnim News looks to brother nations. Iran ready for nuclear cooperation with Muslim nations, says spokesman. The spokesperson for the Atomic Energy Organization of Iran expressed the country's readiness to work with Islamic countries in the promotion of nuclear technology for peaceful purposes. The AEOI spokesman Behruz Kamalvandi expressed Iran's readiness to cooperate with Islamic countries in the promotion of nuclear technology for the Muslim nations' welfare. He said such cooperation would pave the way for the modern Islamic civilization, as working shoulder to shoulder will help the Islamic community to mark a bright future. He finally noted that Iran has made great advances in all fields and technologies related to the nuclear industry, saying the Iranian scientists are working in various arenas, including the discovery and extraction of uranium, production and enrichment of various nuclear fuels, construction of nuclear power plants, production of radiomedicine, and application of nuclear technologies and laser in industries and agriculture. And that would be it for the news segment. Do stay tuned. Iran's nuclear facilities are namely the Bonab Atomic Energy Research Center, which conducts research on irradiation and other agricultural issues. There's Bushehr, which has 2 partially completed nuclear power reactors of 1,000 megawatts. As for Natanz, it is the famous uranium enrichment facility, which was also famously sabotaged of late. Last on my list is Isfahan Nuclear Fuel Research and Production Center. That's Iran's largest nuclear research center, where about 3,000 scientists work.
To keep the Natanz Center running, we need experts in electronics, computer science, chemistry, physics, physical chemistry, and many other sciences required to run the Natanz complex with computers. This will help advance knowledge and science in chemistry, physics, IT, electronics, and other fields.
To keep it all going and enhancing, education can never stop. But before getting to that, let's go over the many instances of sabotage Iran's nuclear program has weathered and why. Talks between Iran and the US are not preluded by friendliness, at least on the US's part. A common coincidence is sabotage of Iran's nuclear program and killing of its nuclear scientists by US ally Israel most every time Iran and the West are about to come to an understanding. Now, a 7th round of the critical JCPOA Vienna talks are scheduled for November the 29th. So just before, when Iran's been accepted as full member to the UNSCEAR, Israel's objection is a given.
The Westerners have attempted to block our progress on 3 occasions so far. The first was in 2003 when they asked us to suspend our work to negotiate. We had made considerable progress in a short period back then, but to prove our goodwill and let them verify that we're not after nuclear weapons and that our goal is peaceful, we agreed to the suspension. The suspensions were the first incident that hurt our nuclear program. The Westerners, not including the US at the time, tried to stop us, but 2 years later we started our work again. They realized that they couldn't stop us, and then came the assassinations.
The April round of Vienna talks came just 3 days after a sabotage attack at the key Iranian nuclear plant near Natanz, an act of nuclear terrorism, as Iran put it. What happened was an explosion cut off electricity to the site, damaging an unknown number of centrifuges. Centrifuges are machines that make uranium usable for nuclear purposes. Mr. Abniki is former head of Iran's Atomic Energy Organization's Development Center. He shared his views with Iran Today.
It is needless to say that the sanctions have been in place since the beginning of the Islamic Revolution in 1979, when the Iranians decided to be independent and not to be despicably submissive to the West anymore. Since that day, they have been imposing different sanctions under different pretexts. And if we didn't have a nuclear program, they would definitely find another excuse to justify their mean sanctions. They want us to be entirely dependent, so that we become completely obedient to them. They could not tolerate our missile program too, because they know it has strengthened our authority and defensive power.
The Vienna talks are to get the US to lift sanctions off this country, what it was supposed to do by the 2015 JCPOA or nuclear deal. But former US President Donald Trump binned that deal and reimposed and reinforced sanctions on this country, so Iran also started reversing its commitments to the deal. Now, what's the result of that and US efforts, continuous US efforts to weaken Iran's nuclear program and portray its politicians as weak in the eyes of the people? Iran mustered up its will and is now enriching uranium to 60%. That's up from what was under 4% to 20% and now 60%. Iran also attempted adding about 1,000 advanced centrifuges to its operation at Natanz. Looks like the US missed again. Its greatest achievement from all its plotting and planning has been to alienate the Iranian people. It's not just the level of purity that matters, but the volume. Iran's 20% enriched uranium reserves now exceed 210 kilograms, and its 60% reserves amount to 25 kilograms. This country is also producing 150 types of deuterons, radiopharmacies used for diagnosing and treating various diseases, including cancer, and the best heavy water in the world. Also, we've made considerable progress in producing laser applicable in healthcare as well as industrial sectors. The April 2021 Natanz attack was not the first. Last summer came a destruction of a large assembly facility for advanced centrifuges. More recently, there was an assassination against a very prominent Iranian nuclear scientist, Fakhrizadeh. That was 27th November 2020. Also, years ago, under the Obama administration, the cyber attack Stuxnet did significant damage to centrifuges at Natanz. It is in a game similar to the American game that Iran has moved up to 60% uranium enrichment to strengthen its negotiating position in the Vienna talks, among other reasons.
The Americans and the Israelis had a plan to damage Iranian facilities by any means, one of which was the Stuxnet virus. They had put the virus in the equipment installed in our facilities, enabling them to infiltrate some of the computers that run the centrifuges. Needless to say, all centrifuges are run by computers, so the infected computers damaged some centrifuges. They thought that the trick would destroy Iran's nuclear industry, at least in Natanz, but they were wrong.
Between 2007 and 2012, several assassination attempts were made, leaving 4 nuclear scientists dead. Those were Masoud Ali Mohammadi, Majid Shahriari, Dariush Rezai Nejad, and Mustafa Ahmadi Roshan, while another scientist, Fereydun Abbasi, was wounded in an attempted murder in 2010 but survived.
They think that they can advance their agenda by assassinating people, which is partly true. After a scientist is assassinated, you'll need to wait for 30 years to have someone like him trained, if at all. This is a cause for concern, but on the other hand, this made people more resolute to continue their work with more rigor. Our distinctive attitude, which I call the spirit of self-sacrifice, has enabled us to do that. When such incidents take place, we'll become more courageous to try harder. This led to an increase in the number of young people who choose to study and start work in this field.
The one thing that curbed Iran's nuclear program was diplomacy and convention, meaning the 2015 JCPOA or nuclear deal signed between Iran and the P5+1 countries, which include the US. But Iran's commitment to that deal was returned by US deal-breaking. Talking of the importance of education to the livelihood of the nuclear program, universities are closely connected to nuclear research centers. In 1959, soon after the launch of the Iranian nuclear program, the Tehran Nuclear Research Center, TNRC, was established as part of Tehran University. And in 2007, the Nuclear Science and Technology Research Institute, NSTRI, was established to meet the country's demand for the development of nuclear science and technologies. NSTRI is affiliated to Iran's Atomic Energy Organization. Examples for nuclear education and educational centers are many, but what's marvelous is 1,300 students switching majors to nuclear sciences in 2012 to fill in for an assassinated scientist, Ahmadi Roshan. More than 1,500 sanctions were imposed on Iran after Trump's USA withdrew from the nuclear deal or agreement, many of those sanctions being related to Iran's nuclear activities. It is now to be seen whether this country's nuclear upgrading by research and membership will serve as the deterrent and incentive intended to get those sanctions lifted with the November Vienna talks. That's it for today. Thanks for watching from the whole team. Do return to the box at the same times next week for a follow-up or a totally different story. You can also watch us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram via @IranTodayShow. Bye for now.